Ladies and gentlemen, there is a power so deep, so profound, and so often overlooked that it can change your life completely, and that power is silence. Not the silence of emptiness or absence, but the sacred silence that speaks louder than 1,000 words. In a world filled with noise, with constant demands, distractions, and voices pulling us in every direction, silence becomes more than a luxury. It becomes a necessity. It is in silence that you meet the truest version of yourself. It is in silence that you hear the whispers of God, and it is in silence that your soul finds its balance, your heart finds its peace, and your mind regains its clarity. The great victories of life are not always won in public, in front of crowds, or through loud declarations. Some of the greatest breakthroughs come when we are alone, quiet, still, listening. Silence is not emptiness, it is fullness. Though the world may define silence as the absence of sound, in truth, silence is the presence of something greater. It is the presence of peace, the presence of power, and the presence of God. When you enter into silence, you are not stepping into a void. You are stepping into a sacred space where the soul begins to breathe, where the heart begins to speak, and where the mind begins to listen. So often we fill our days with noise, chatter, entertainment, distractions, thinking that noise is a sign of life. But life, real life, is often found in the quiet places. The deepest rivers do not make the most noise, yet they carry the most strength. The strongest hearts are not always the loudest, but the ones who know how to sit in silence and grow from it. In silence you meet yourself, not your titles, not your roles, not your accomplishments, but your true self. It is where your fears show up and your faith has the chance to rise. In silence, all the masks fall away. You are no longer performing for the world. You are simply being, and in that being, you discover the beauty of your own spirit. You hear thoughts you didn't know were buried inside you. You see dreams you thought had disappeared. You begin to sense a direction, a calling, a divine nudge guiding you forward, not from outside influences, but from within. The fullness of silence comes not just from internal reflection, but from divine connection. God does not always shout. He does not always announce his presence with thunder. More often, he whispers. He speaks in stillness. He moves in quiet moments of trust. When we still our hearts, when we calm our racing thoughts, we begin to hear that still small voice reminding us that we are loved, that we are guided, that we are not alone. In silence, anxiety melts and peace enters. Doubt shrinks and confidence grows, not because we found the answer in ourselves, but because we found ourselves open enough to hear the answer from above. When you make silence a daily practice, you begin to live from a deeper place. You are no longer rushed by the noise of the world, but rooted in something greater. You begin to respond instead of react. You begin to trust instead of panic. And most of all, you begin to walk with a quiet confidence, knowing that within the silence is a power far greater than noise could ever give. It's not the absence of sound that matters. It's the presence of peace, clarity, and strength. This is the gift of silence. This is the fullness that the world often misses. But if you will step into it, honor it, and embrace it, silence will begin to change you from the inside out. God speaks in stillness. In the still, quiet moments of life, when the noise of the world fades away and the clamor of our busy minds begins to settle, something sacred happens. We begin to hear what we could not hear before. We begin to sense what we once missed. In the stillness, God's voice is not loud, but it is unmistakable. It is gentle, but it moves the heart with power. It does not come in shouts or chaos. It comes like a soft whisper to the soul, calm and clear, reassuring and strong. We often search for answers in the rush of life, hoping for signs, longing for direction, asking for miracles. But many times the answer is not in the loud moments. It is in the silent ones. When we still ourselves, when we make space for quiet, we create room for God to speak. We are so used to noise, so conditioned to respond to every alert, every distraction, every voice around us, that we forget how to listen with our hearts. But stillness teaches us to tune our inner ear to the frequency of heaven. In that sacred quiet, we begin to understand what peace really feels like. We begin to recognize that God's guidance is not always a dramatic interruption, but a gentle conviction, a deep knowing, a soft leading toward what is right. He speaks in peace. He speaks in calm. He speaks when our hearts are ready to receive, not when we are rushing through the day. Throughout Scripture, God met people in silence. Elijah did not hear God in the wind, or the earthquake, or the fire, but in a still small voice. Jesus himself withdrew to quiet places to pray, to seek the Father in solitude, to be renewed in silence. This is not weakness. This is divine strength. Stillness is not passivity. It is powerful receptivity. It is opening the door of the soul and saying, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." In silence, trust deepens, faith grows, worry fades. God does not shout over the noise we allow into our lives. He waits for us to be still, to be quiet, to be present. And in that moment, we hear what truly matters. To live a life connected to God, we must learn to value stillness as much as action. We must understand that guidance is not always dramatic. It is often subtle, gentle, and quiet. But it is real, it is life-changing. The more we practice listening in stillness, the more clearly we will recognize the voice of God guiding us, loving us, calling us forward. His voice will never confuse or condemn. It will comfort, challenge, and uplift. And it will always lead us in the way of peace. So, when life feels uncertain, when direction is unclear, when the noise overwhelms, don't run outward. Go inward, be still, wait, listen, because God still speaks. And he speaks most clearly in stillness. The noisy world confuses, but silence clarifies. Every day we are surrounded by a constant stream of noise, voices competing for our attention, opinions flooding our minds, endless information that never lets us rest. This noise doesn't just come from outside. It begins to echo inside us. It creates confusion, distraction, and anxiety. We lose touch with what truly matters. We forget who we are. Our thoughts become tangled, our emotions unsettled, and our direction unclear. In this constant clamor, it becomes nearly impossible to hear the deeper voice within, the voice of wisdom, the voice of purpose, the voice of God. But silence, pure, intentional, sacred silence, is the antidote to this confusion. When we step away from the noise, when we turn off the distractions, when we sit in stillness, something powerful happens. The fog begins to lift. The clutter in our minds starts to clear. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once seemed chaotic starts to find order. Silence acts like a mirror. It reflects back to us the condition of our thoughts, our feelings, our beliefs. In silence, we are no longer being pulled in every direction. We begin to center ourselves. We begin to see what we had been too distracted to notice. Silence, doesn't just quiet the world around us. It restores the world within us. When we choose to pause and be still, clarity returns. We start to understand what we truly value, what we truly need, and where we are truly meant to go. It is in the quiet moments that the answers come, not forced, not rushed, but revealed gently like a sunrise breaking through the clouds. You don't need to shout to hear the truth. You need to listen in silence. You don't need to search far to find your path. You need to clear away the noise that hides it. In a world filled with confusion, silence is a gift. It allows us to reconnect with our own inner guidance. It helps us separate what is urgent from what is important. It removes the dust from our spiritual eyes so we can see more clearly. It brings us back to the present moment, the only place where peace lies. Silence is not an escape. It is a return to sanity, to stillness, to wisdom, to God. And in that return, we remember who we are. We remember what matters. We gain the clarity we were missing all along. So when life begins to overwhelm you, when decisions seem impossible, when emotions run wild, don't push through the noise. Step back, find your silence, enter into it with trust. Let it do its quiet work in your soul. Let it reveal, restore, and renew you. Because silence doesn't just quiet the confusion. It replaces it with clarity. And from clarity comes peace. From peace comes purpose. And from purpose comes a life led not by chaos, but by calm and confident direction. Silence is the secret place of strength. In the quiet, away from the noise of life, away from the demands of the world, we find a hidden well of power that cannot be found anywhere else. There is a sacredness in the moments when we step away, when we turn down the volume of the world and tune into the deeper rhythm of our spirit. This is not weakness, it is wisdom. Even Jesus, the Son of God, withdrew to solitary places. He stepped away from the crowds, from the miracles, from the teaching, and sought solitude, not because he was tired of people, but because he understood that strength is renewed in stillness. He knew that silence was not a pause from the mission. It was preparation for it. We live in a world that celebrates constant motion, endless activity, and busy schedules. The louder we are, the more visible we become, the more we are told we are achieving something. But real strength doesn't always look like action. Sometimes it looks like stillness. Real power doesn't always speak the loudest. It listens, it waits, it centers, and this strength, this deep spiritual strength, cannot be manufactured or rushed. It is cultivated in silence. In the secret place, away from the applause and the pressure, your soul is strengthened. Your thoughts become clear. Your burdens grow lighter. Your vision returns. And most importantly, you reconnect with the one who is the true source of your strength. When we turn inward in silence, we do not shrink, we expand. We draw power from the very presence of God who meets us in the stillness. In that quiet place, faith is rekindled, hope is restored, confidence is rebuilt. It is in silence that we begin to understand that we are not alone in our journey, that divine help is closer than we think. Just as a tree sends its roots deeper during still, silent seasons, we too grow stronger when we pause and dwell in the quiet. The roots of our spirit dig deep, unseen by others, but deeply anchored in strength that cannot be shaken. Many people try to find strength through noise, through talking, planning, and doing. But some battles are not won by striving, they are won by surrender. Some victories come not through resistance, but through rest. Silence becomes our spiritual battleground where we lay down our anxieties and pick up peace. It is where we stop trying to control everything and start trusting in the divine flow of grace. And in that release, strength rises, calm strength, quiet strength, a strength that does not boast but endures, a strength that walks forward not with fear but with faith. So when you feel tired, overwhelmed, confused, or weak, don't run to the noise. Run to the silence, withdraw like Jesus did. Sit in the presence of stillness. Let God meet you there. Let him fill you, renew you, and strengthen you in ways the world never could. That secret place of silence will become your source of unshakable strength. Peace flows from silent reflection. In the quiet moments when we step back from the noise and hurry of life, we allow the waters of our soul to settle. Reflection is not simply thinking. It is deep listening. It is looking inward without judgment, letting the rush of the world slow to a stillness where clarity begins to rise. When we give ourselves permission to pause, to breathe, to be fully present in silence, something extraordinary happens. The mind begins to clear, the heart begins to soften, worry begins to loosen its grip. Peace doesn't always come from changing the circumstances around us. More often, it comes from calming the storms within us, and that calm begins with reflection. The pace of life today rarely allows for silence. From the moment we wake up, we're bombarded by voices, notifications, demands, and distractions. The result is a scattered mind and a restless spirit. But peace is not found in the midst of constant motion. It is discovered in the deliberate act of stopping. When we choose to reflect in silence, we give our spirit a chance to catch up with our body. We begin to process rather than react. We become aware of what we've been feeling, thinking, and even suppressing, and in that awareness, healing begins, solutions become visible, priorities realign. The soul finds rest not in more activity but in more stillness. Silent reflection is not a retreat from life. It is a return to yourself. It allows you to reconnect with what matters most. In silence, you remember who you are beyond your roles and responsibilities. You begin to hear the gentle inner voice that is often drowned out by the outer world. That voice carries wisdom, calm, and truth. It reminds you that you are not alone, that you are not your fear, your stress, or your failures. You are a soul created by God, capable of peace, clarity, and purpose. And that truth settles into your being not through words, but through stillness. As you begin to practice silent reflection daily, even for a few minutes, you'll notice a shift. The chaos outside won't control your emotions as easily. The opinions of others won't define your worth. The storms of life won't shake your foundation the way they once did. Why? Because your peace will not be rooted in what is happening around you, but in what is happening within you. That is the gift of silent reflection. It is not passive. It is powerful. It grounds you. It strengthens you. It prepares you to face the world with a spirit that is calm, confident, and centered. Let your heart be quiet. Let your mind be still. Enter that sacred space of silent reflection where peace begins to flow. Not because the world is silent, but because you are. And when you find that peace, hold it. Carry it with you. Let it flow into every word you speak, every step you take, and every decision you make. Great decisions are born in still moments. In the noise and rush of life, it can feel necessary to make choices quickly, to respond instantly, to solve everything in the moment. But real wisdom is not born from pressure. It is born from pause. When we allow ourselves to be still, to slow down, to quiet the noise around us, we create space for truth to emerge. In that space of silence, the mind calms, the heart steadies, and we can begin to hear what really matters. The best decisions are not made when we are overwhelmed, emotional, or under pressure. They are made in those sacred pauses where the world slows and clarity rises. When you listen deeply in silence, you begin to connect with your own inner knowing. You recognize what aligns with your purpose and what doesn't. You start to distinguish between what is urgent and what is truly important. You hear the whispers of your conscience, the stirrings of your soul, and often the still small voice of God guiding you with peace and quiet confidence. That kind of guidance does not come through noise. It doesn't come through panic or distraction. It comes in stillness. The silence helps you hear, not just external advice or surface-level logic, but the deep wisdom that God placed within you. Listening in silence is also the highest form of respect, to yourself, to others, and to God. When you listen to yourself, you begin to understand your true desires, your real fears, your honest dreams. You begin to make choices not based on pressure or people, pleasing but on purpose. When you listen to others in silence, without interrupting, judging, or planning your next words, you begin to hear more than what they're saying. You hear what they're feeling. And when you listen to God in silence, you don't come with a list of demands or a rush of words. You come with an open heart, ready to receive His direction in whatever form it comes. Sometimes it's a scripture that comes to mind. Sometimes it's a sense of peace. Sometimes it's a conviction that quietly but firmly says, "This is the way, walk in it." Great leaders, great thinkers, great spiritual giants throughout history have all known this truth. Before you act, you must be still. Before you speak, you must listen. Before you decide, you must reflect. Because in those still moments, your heart aligns with your purpose and your mind aligns with truth. You don't have to force clarity. It arrives naturally when you are quiet enough to receive it. So the next time you're faced with a difficult choice, don't rush, don't panic, don't reach for 100 opinions. Be still, be silent, wait, listen deeply to yourself, to others, and to God. The right decision may not shout at you, but it will rise within you with peace, certainty, and strength. Trust the wisdom that is born in stillness. That is where your greatest choices are made. Faith grows in silent trust. There are moments in life when words simply are not enough. Moments when prayers have been spoken, tears have been shed, and still the answer has not come. In those moments, silence can feel heavy, even frightening, but that silence is not always empty. It is not a sign that God is absent. Sometimes it is in the very silence where faith begins to take root and grow. Trust does not need noise to thrive. It needs stillness. It needs surrender. It needs a heart that is willing to believe even when there is nothing visible to hold onto. There is a sacred strength in silent trust. It is not loud. It does not announce itself, but it stands firm when everything else is uncertain. Silent trust says, "I don't see the answer yet, but I believe it's coming." It says, "I don't understand, but I know God does." It is the deep assurance that even when heaven is quiet, God is still working. He is still present. He is still good. Trust like that is not built in the easy times. It is built in the waiting. It is built in the stillness where the soul chooses faith over fear, peace over panic, and hope over despair. When we stop trying to fix everything, when we lay down our anxious questions and simply sit in God's presence, something powerful happens. Faith is refined. It is no longer based on emotions or circumstances. It becomes anchored in the character of God, unchanging, faithful, and true. Silent trust is not weak. It is the strongest kind of faith because it requires no proof, no sign, no guarantee, only belief. And that kind of belief moves mountains, not always in the world outside, but always in the world within. Think of the moments in Scripture when God was silent. Think of the days between the cross and the resurrection. The disciples were confused, afraid, unsure. But even in that silence, God was not inactive. He was accomplishing the greatest victory the world would ever know. In your own seasons of silence, remember this: delay is not denial. God's silence is not rejection. It is often preparation. It is often the sacred ground where your roots grow deeper so your life can rise higher. You may not always hear God speak the way you expect, but if you lean into that silence with trust, you'll begin to feel His presence in your spirit. You'll notice His peace holding you steady. You'll see small signs of His faithfulness showing up in unexpected ways. Trust doesn't always need answers. It needs surrender. Silent trust is choosing to believe even when it's hard, even when it's quiet, even when nothing makes sense. That's where real faith lives. That's where it grows. In the quiet chambers of the soul, faith finds its voice, not through noise, but through still, unwavering trust. A silent soul is a strong soul. In a world that often associates strength with loudness, aggression, and the need to constantly assert oneself, true strength can be easily misunderstood. But real strength, the kind that endures storms, the kind that holds steady when everything else falls apart, does not boast, does not shout, and does not need to prove itself. It moves quietly, calmly, and with quiet authority. Just like deep waters flow silently with power beneath the surface, a silent soul carries a strength that is deep, steady, and unshakable. Silence within the soul is not the absence of thought or feeling. It is the mastery of them. It is the ability to remain composed when the world is in chaos. It is the discipline of listening before speaking, of thinking before reacting, of holding peace when others lose theirs. A silent soul doesn't mean a soul that never speaks. It means a soul that doesn't need to speak just to feel significant. It has already found its worth. It has already discovered its foundation. It is not shaken by noise because it is rooted in truth. Stillness allows the soul to gather strength. When you are silent within, you become more aware of what's happening around you, and more importantly, what's happening within you. You begin to recognize emotions without being ruled by them. You understand situations more clearly because your mind isn't clouded by reaction. A silent soul has the patience to wait, the wisdom to discern, and the faith to trust even when answers are not immediate. That is strength, not the strength of force, but the strength of resilience. There's a quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are and whose you are. When your soul is silent, you are not swayed by the opinions of others or the pressures of the world. You move by purpose, not by pressure. You speak only when it adds value. You act only when it aligns with peace. And you listen more deeply, not only to people, but to the subtle promptings of God within. That kind of strength does not come from noise. It is born in stillness. Many of the strongest people you will ever meet are not the loudest. They are the ones who carry themselves with grace under pressure. They are not easily offended, easily shaken, or easily distracted. Their power is quiet, but it is real. It is consistent. It is enduring. They have cultivated a silent soul, a soul that knows how to be still, how to wait, how to trust, and how to move forward when the time is right. If you want to become unshakable, learn the power of inner silence. Let your soul be still like deep water. Let your strength come not from how loud you are, but from how deeply rooted you are. Because, in the end, it is the silent soul that withstands the storm and walks forward with strength the world cannot understand, but cannot deny. Silence teaches patience, humility, and grace. In the quiet spaces of life, when there is nothing to say and no one to impress, the soul begins to learn lessons that words cannot teach. Patience is not learned when everything is going our way. It is learned when we are waiting, unsure, and tempted to rush ahead. In silence, we are forced to slow down. There is no quick fix, no immediate gratification. And yet, in that delay, in that waiting, something begins to develop within us. We start to see that not everything can be controlled, and that's where patience is born, not as frustration, but as peace in the pause. True patience is not just waiting. It is waiting with calm, with trust, and with inner strength. In silence, we also learn humility. The world often tells us that we need to be heard to matter, that we need to speak to prove our worth. But silence reminds us that our value does not come from how loud we are or how much attention we receive. It comes from who we are when no one is watching. It comes from the quiet courage to be still, to listen, and to learn. Humility grows when we recognize that we do not have all the answers, that we are not the center of everything, and that it is okay to simply be. Silence strips away pride. It removes the need to constantly perform or defend ourselves. It creates space to hear others and to hear God, who often speaks in whispers rather than shouts. Grace, too, flows from silence. When we are quiet within, we are more likely to respond with kindness rather than anger, with gentleness rather than harshness. Grace is not weakness. It is strength under control. It is the ability to forgive, to understand, and to extend compassion even when it is not deserved. Silence helps us pause before we react. It helps us see people not as obstacles or enemies, but as fellow human beings on their own difficult journeys. Grace becomes a natural response when we have taken time in silence to reflect, to breathe, and to open our heart. The world around us is filled with noise, debates, arguments, judgments, and demands for attention. But character is not shaped in the noise. It is refined in silence. It is in those moments when we choose not to speak, when we choose not to defend ourselves, when we choose to be still, that we grow. We grow deeper. We grow stronger. We become more grounded in what truly matters. Silence is not empty. It is full of opportunity. It is full of the unseen work of the soul, and that work builds the kind of character that cannot be shaken by the storms of life. So embrace silence. Let it be your teacher. Let it show you how to wait with peace, how to live with humility, and how to walk with grace. In the end, silence will do more to shape your spirit than 1,000 speeches ever could. In silence, we connect to our higher purpose. Life moves fast, often so fast that we barely have time to think, to reflect, or to truly listen. We chase goals, meet deadlines, fulfill responsibilities, and keep moving from one task to the next. But somewhere deep within, our soul keeps asking a quiet question. Why am I here? What is my purpose? That question cannot be answered in the noise. It can't be found in the hustle. It only begins to reveal itself when we stop, when we get quiet and when we allow ourselves to listen, not to the world, but to something higher, something eternal. It is in the hush of the soul where our true direction begins to rise. Purpose is not just about what we do. It's about who we are called to become, and becoming requires reflection. It requires spiritual clarity. That clarity comes not from doing more, but from being still enough to listen. When the noise fades, the deeper voice within begins to speak. Sometimes it comes as a gentle nudge, sometimes as a fresh vision, and other times as a deep peace that says, "This is the way." The silence gives room for the Spirit of God to speak to our heart, to remind us of the gifts we carry, the dreams He placed inside us, and the calling we were created for. Too often we look for purpose in the eyes of others. We measure it by achievements, recognition, or comparison, but our higher purpose doesn't come from outside of us. It is already planted within. Silence is the sacred soil where it begins to grow. When we step away from distraction and come into stillness, we are no longer influenced by what the world says we should be. We begin to hear what God is saying we already are. In that still place, dreams begin to take shape. Not just dreams for success, but dreams that matter, dreams that serve, dreams that reflect something greater than ourselves. And those dreams don't come from ego. They come from divine alignment. When you sit in silence with an open heart, you begin to see the threads of your life, the moments that shaped you, the experiences that humbled you, the gifts that keep resurfacing. Suddenly, what once seemed random begins to feel intentional. What once felt confusing begins to make sense. Your story begins to point toward a higher plan. That plan may not be fully visible yet, but in silence, your spirit becomes ready to walk in it. You start moving not with restlessness, but with purpose. Not chasing approval, but following calling. Your higher purpose isn't something you have to invent. It's something you discover, and the place of discovery is silence. Make room for that silence. Protect it. Enter into it regularly. Let it speak to you, shape you, guide you, because in the hush of the soul, where the world cannot interfere, your deepest dreams begin to align with God's highest plans. That is where true purpose is born. And so I say to you, walk boldly into the quiet, trust the stillness, and there you will find not only peace, but the power of God gently guiding your every step toward a life of purpose, strength, and unshakable joy.